Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure and honor to be introducing Bas Smets today. And if I would read Bas's entire bio, we'd be here till next Tuesday. So I will read some of it, and then, we'll talk about a couple of very exciting projects. So Bas Smets has a background in landscape architecture, civil engineering, and architecture. He founded his firm Bureau Bas Smets in Brussels in 2007 and has since completed 50 projects in more than 12 countries with his team of 30 collaborators. These projects really vary in scale from territorial visions, infrastructural landscapes, large parks, private parks, and city centers and film sets. He has realized projects that include Les Parcs des Ateliers in Arles, the Park of Tournon Taxes in Brussels, the public space around the Trinity Tower in Paris La Défense, and the Himara waterfront in Albania. And very recently, in 22, he also won the very prestigious competition of the public space around Notre-Dame Cathedral, which we will be discussing in detail today. Several of his projects are currently under construction in Lyon, in Antwerp, in Amagansett, New York. And each of these projects really research the possible role and ambition of landscape projects. And his aim is to invent augmented landscapes, which is to produce a new microclimate whilst creating new atmospheres. And Bas also collaborates with a lot of scientists and artists, so his practice is really constantly innovating and changing. In 2023, Bas was also appointed professor in practice at the Graduate School of Design of Harvard. So he just got back from Boston, and as you can imagine, he is commuting a lot these days. With his design studio, he explores new ways to transform the city into urban ecology, really capable of producing cooling microclimates to counter climate change. Now, when I was speaking with Bas, and as we were prepping for today, I was telling them that I found it interesting that architecture is not accidental, but nature is. To which Bas very quickly corrected me and said, nature is in fact extremely determined. It knows what it wants to do, how it grows, how it needs to expand, and there is no accident in its science. There you have it, form and impact. And so on that note, please give a very warm welcome to Bas Smets. Bas, how are you today?
Very good, very happy to be here.
So before we dive into a lot of exciting projects, I wanted to start by a quote of Walter Gropius, who is one of my go-tos. Specialists are people who always repeat the same mistakes. I apologize to any specialists here. I didn't say it. Now, Bas, you trained as an engineer and an architect and a landscape architect, and you often say that you don't actually do the same project twice. How is this kind of multidisciplinary foundation a part of your ethos, and how does it constantly push you to always innovate rather than repeating any type of format?
First of all, thank you for having me here. Thank you, Christina. It's really a pleasure after having spoken at the Engadine Art Talks, I think a couple of years ago, to be here in Paris. And to respond to your question, I didn't know what I was going to do when I was a kid. I was interested in everything, and I had no idea what I would become. And so in that sense, I've been studying many things. I started with architecture, I did engineering, and I finally found landscape architecture as maybe the closest to what I wanted to do. But so by studying first these other things, actually I started with philosophy for a couple of months, is that I understood that you're not learning something to repeat, but you're trying to get as much information and backgrounds to invent something new. And in that idea of inventing something new, for me, each project needs to be an invention. Each project needs to teach me something I didn't know before starting the project. So in that sense, we try to never accept a similar brief twice. So to always go through the hard pain of not knowing where to go, of inventing a new way of doing. And that's really been the leitmotif, I think, in all the projects we've done. Which is not very easy in this world, because the first thing they ask you is, do you have references of this type of project? And I would say no, that's why I'm accepting it. But it's that we live in a world where you kind of pushed into repeating a thing that was successful. But so I do believe that especially in architecture and landscape architecture, each project should be a radical invention of what is possible.
It's a high risk, high reward business for sure. So in your bio, I briefly touched on your aim of inventing this concept of augmented landscapes, interventions that harness natural processes to create these new microclimates and atmospheres. Could you tell us a little bit about that in context of your project at Luma Arles, which was, I would say, maybe one of your most experimental ones, but also most successful?
I'll give it some planetary context, if you don't mind.
Please.
From your stripes to these stripes, this is 1850, beautiful deep blue. 100 years later, we go to a lighter blue. Then we go to the 2000s, it's becoming redder, and as you all know, we go into the deep red at the end of the century. Now, this is the moderate scenario from the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, as they produced last year in March, the sixth note. And we don't really understand what that means. I mean, I've read all the reports, I've spoken to the climate specialists, and you read about it. Again, a tipping point is passed, but it will suddenly create a whole different reality. And to cope with that, or to at least find some idea of hope, idea of knowing what to do, we try to imagine landscapes as a way to get the city ready for this change. And so our projects become a kind of activism, in the sense that we use the logic of plants to transform the city. And so we're really at the intersection between plant science. That's why I work with neurobiologists like Stefano Mancuso, working with cities that, of course, are aware and want to face the problem, and then inventing new landscapes. And these landscapes, they produce microclimates. That's why I call them augmented landscapes. They're not just there to be beautiful, but they're there to produce a new reality. And Arles is indeed probably one of the most complex and most daring projects we've done, I think, and I can walk you through a couple of slides. So this was Arles when I first visited it in 2009, when Maya Hoffman, the president of Luma Foundation, had invited me to come see the site. It was a site that had been dug out of the rocks in 1850s with dynamite, so it's perfectly horizontal. On the rocks, they had put a layer of concrete to put in tracks to repair trains, basically. That activity stopped in 1980. It was abandoned. It was used every year for the Rencontre de la Photographie, and then purchased by the Luma Foundation. And Maya Hoffman asked me that day in April, I remember it was very hot, 2009, I want to make a park for the Arlesiens. And I remember I thought, a park here. I mean, this is probably the most difficult site to make a park. There's no soil, there's no water, there's the heat of the south, and you have the Mistral wind. And so we thought, how can we make that park, and how can that park create a new climate? So we thought, can we use the evapotranspiration of the plants? Can we bring water that would also evaporate? Can we look at all the parameters that decides your bodily comfort? We call it Universal Thermal Climate Index. That's how we measure that. And so what we did is we made a climate machine. And so from this semi-desert climate you see here, the perceived temperature would go to 55, 60 degrees. For those who remember going to the Rencontre more than 5 years ago, you would walk from one exhibition place to the other, you would have a headache because your body cannot stand this heat. The soil would absorb all the solar energy 18 hours a day and emit it, so you would be between the sun and a heating surface. So as you can see here, we put in a pond, which evaporates. It's evaporating right now. We put in 80,000 plants. We made a whole topography on top of that bedrock in which the plants can root. And so we lower temperature with 20 degrees. And so now in summer, plenty of parents go with their kid, play on the big lawn that you see here on your right. And that replaces this concrete platform with a new Mediterranean climate. And so I show you an old Google Maps. You can see the resolution is that of 2009. At plantation, you see here are 80,000 plants. You still see little circles because they had just been planted. And then last year, Iwan Baum took another picture, and you see the volume. We doubled in volume, and so this narrative that we produced of imagining what nature would have done and how to accelerate the natural processes produces its own aesthetic, in a sense. So we didn't choose the plants for, it's always an aesthetical composition, but it was really thought of how can plants do this? And I have one slide to finish this Arles presentation, is that at the beginning in 2009, I told Maya Hoffman that I would calculate the success of my project not by the number of visitors, because everyone was speaking like how many people would come to the museum, but by the number of migrating birds that would come to the site. And that was kind of a kind of a daring thing to say before starting the project. But so last year we asked a scientific center to do bird observation. 57 species have come to the site. We put bird nests, and so now there's 20 species nesting on the site. So just saying that from this semi-desert, in quite short time you can come to an almost independent ecological organism. And that, I think, is for us was we had really 10 years of research that we could do to understand that this radical change is doable and is very necessary.
Totally, and I think it's so interesting how you also approach the project by really thinking about, right, what will this landscape look like in 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, 400 years? Because in the end, plants will, nature will outlive us all. So it's a question we constantly have to ask ourselves in, what is it that we're leaving behind, and how can we leave the best possible world behind? And I think so much of what you do focuses on that. And what I also think was incredible, you have 80,000 plants, 140 different species, right? And now it's also a botanical garden for schools and children to go and see. So suddenly you're creating this entire new ecosystem.
Yes, and what we forget, because we think like animals, right? We are close to the animal kingdom. We think like animals, and we don't think like plants. Plants have a whole other way of dealing with time and reality, because once they're rooted, they don't move. So they need to manipulate their environment to survive. While we're not happy, we go somewhere else. You're thirsty, you go get something to drink. The plant needs to or capture humidity or capture rainwater or go look for it with its roots. So they're much smarter than us about the environment, because they manipulate it and they transform it. And so there is this hidden force of nature that we constantly push back. And the moment you understand or you study what nature would have done or would do, you can accelerate that. And then suddenly what was going to happen anyway is coming there much faster. And so those 400 years of climax theory, we kind of condensed it to 20 years. And the interesting thing about it is that nature is helping you do it. And so that was very interesting in Arles. We followed up the years after the plantation very closely. We put sensors in the soil. For every 10 trees, I had one tree that I call my witness tree, that I would capture the humidity close to the trunk, away from the trunk, in the soil. And so I knew where the roots were. And by knowing where the roots were, we could measure exactly how much water we should give it in the beginning. Now we don't give water anymore because the rainwater is enough. But this kind of technology helps you to better understand what the plants need. And that creates, again, this kind of augmented landscapes where suddenly a project is possible where maybe 20 years ago we would have not known how to do it.
Yeah, and I think in that vein, thinking about this idea of, the past and the future, moving a little bit further north to Paris, of course, you won this incredibly prestigious and exciting competition which is redesigning the very public and historical space around Notre-Dame. Can you give us a brief overview of your process and approach on a project of this scale and magnitude?
So I'll give you an interesting or a nice anecdote or a fun fact, as the Americans say. So we did Arles, and Arles was tough because we needed to plant those plants in the heat. Was it going to work? Many people told us it will never work. So it was a lot of short nights and doubt and believing in the idea. And I told my wife that when Arles is done, we take a break. 1 month later, we get selected for Notre-Dame, and up, back in overdrive. And I tell her, like...
Just a 10-year commitment, yeah.
When Notre-Dame competition is finished, because I never thought I would win, it's like, we take a break. We win it, up. So it's been quite a ride. But then, so we just finished Arles. We get selected for Notre-Dame, and I'm thinking, okay, everything we've just learned in Arles, let's see if it works in the city center, in the heat island of Paris, and so we start doing our research, and I reread Victor Hugo and L'Île de la Cité, the cradle of Paris, and we look at the Île de la Cité, which changes its form over the centuries. The urbanism changes, and we think the only thing standing is Notre-Dame. She becomes a witness of a city looking for its form. And what form is that? And so we see how the idea of the outdoor space around Notre-Dame changes throughout the centuries, making the little plaza that was there before bigger and bigger, changing the way monuments should be seen. Well, the original architects wanted you to look at it from close by, so you would look up to the heavens. The 19th century approach is looking at it from far away as a freestanding monument. So we looked at all that, and we thought the project that we propose is what we think should be the way landscape and buildings, ecology and heritage should work together for the coming centuries, right? So we thought this needs to be the best possible collaboration between these monuments and their surroundings. And so we first did a very precise reading of what was there, which you see here, this isometric view. And I was interested in the fact that these typical typologies of Paris are all there, but in a fragmented form. So you have a bit of alignment, you have a parvis, but the staircases on one side, the kind of strange planters on the other. You have some plantations along the Seine, but then you have this kind of strange cherry trees that were planted. In the back you have a historical garden, and then a wide road, le Quai de l'Archevêché, where cars park, and then the tip of the island that had been realized in the 70s as the amazing monument for the deported. And so we thought, can we, from this history, from this 800 years history of Notre-Dame, but 2,000 years history, because right below here lies the Lutetia, the Roman city. It's a place you can go visit. We thought, can we rethink these typologies from a double point of view, from a climatic point of view? How can these typologies become even more climatic, active climatic, but also from a collective point of view? How can we make a space not only for tourists, because there's 15 million people visiting per year, but also for Parisians? And I had lived in Paris, and it's a place you would never go to. And so we thought, can we find a place that is also attractive for Parisians, because it is a unique place. I mean, along the park here, there's no cars, you're next to the water, you have a view on the Pantheon, you're next to the Notre-Dame. I mean, it is the epicenter of Paris, so how can we bring it back in the mental mapping of the Parisians? And so we studied these typologies and proposed to work from them. So for example, the Rue du Cloître Notre-Dame, we will be planting the first trees, I think in 2 months, in December, to continue the trees along the Hôtel Dieu. We will plant more trees to cut the parvis from the Rue de la Cité, for those who know. And then a very simple but strong gesture, the parvis as wide and as long as a cathedral. what kind of materiality. We went inside many times. We measured all the tiles, and they have this typical checkerboard pattern, white stone, black stone, which we continued outside, not with two colors, but with the special treatment of the pavement. It's called layé in French. It's tiny grooves on the stones, and we put them in a checkerboard pattern that when there's the sun, they reveal this checkerboard pattern. It's a long story, but it was very important for me to make that connection with the inside of the church, which is of course a sacred place. So I didn't want to make a sacred place, but I thought if the sun produces a checkerboard, it becomes a cosmic place. And this you can see now, because we realized the first 20 meters for the opening last year in December. And when there's sun, I didn't put a picture, I should have. You see the checkerboard appearing. More trees on 3 sides to create a clearing in the forest. And when we did our research, we found that the cathedrals were often described as a stone forest, and the columns imitate the forest to bring the pagans, is that what you call it? The non-believers into the cathedral. So it's a stone forest, and I thought, what better than a clearing instead of a stone forest? So by adding these trees, it becomes a clearing. The stone, and we had to discuss, we had to fight with the city, because in Paris the plazas are in granite and the buildings are in limestone. But I wanted a plaza in limestone to have the same stone color as the facade. We got that exception.
Doesn't it also incorporate an incredible water collection system
Exactly.
that you've, yeah.
And that I will show you here. So I'm using my daughter to show you how it works. So while she's running to the cathedral, you see a thin layer of water, 5 millimeters, so not wetting your shoes, that will emerge from a 40-meter long gutter by pression and will run down to the Petit Parvis. And this, what happens, is a chemical reaction. The water will evaporate and will subtract temperature from the air. So it'll feel 5 to 10 degrees less warm. Again, this perceived temperature that we calculate through UTCI. So it's not a water mirror. It's really this little moment of water that will come down, cool down temperature, and disappear. And this is rainwater that we store in winter, that we filter and reuse in summer. And I think it will also create this kind of ephemeral reflections of the cathedral that then disappear. And I must say, another fun fact, I was doing my presentation in the Hôtel de Ville for the mayor of Paris and 23 members of the jury. And of course, it's a bit of a tense moment. You don't want to say something that you shouldn't have said. You know, you're highly concentrated. And so I explained this, and one of the representatives of the bishop, diocèse, he asked me, Monsieur Smets, vous nous proposez de marcher sur l'eau? And I don't think, and I'm telling him, ça a été fait avant, non? And then I thought, Bas, don't say that.
The return of the miracle.
And he was like, And I never thought of that, honestly. I was just thinking about evaporation, UTCI. But so yes, everybody will be able to walk on water in front of the cathedral in 3 years' time. Towards the back of the cathedral, we restore the historical gardens. They're brought back to what they were before the construction works. That's where right now the Base V, all the containers for the construction workers are installed. And then what we do, it's quite interesting. We take out the parking along the Quai de l'Archevêché. It becomes it's scaled down as a road, so it's only for taxis and buses and local residents. And we plant what we call the Arboretum of the Future. We plant 30 climate-resistant trees. So not indigenous trees, but the trees that we think will survive in the coming 50 to 100 years. And by doing that, the moment you arrive on the Ile de la Cité, you're actually in a large park, which integrates, of course, the beautiful memorial of Pinguisson.
And also, well, you might be getting to this, but beneath the Parvis also there's, of course, this archaeological crypt with Roman and medieval remains. How important, was the presence of those deeper layers as you were trying to design above ground?
It's important in the sense that we're not allowed to plant on it because we don't have the weight, the load necessary for it. And we need to keep it accessible, of course. So in our team, we have the architects Grau and NJA, and what they did is they proposed to take out the -1 slab of the parking garage that's not used anymore, to create a new access to the crypt and to create a visitor center. So that's also the part of the project, the underground that becomes the place in which you can have the access to the crypt. Then I've just 3 slides for Notre-Dame. Is this famous UTCI I was speaking to you. This is research we've done with Franck Boutet. And so we looked at the existing situation where you see a heat island building up here and there. This is 2021. Then we projected 2050. We're now at 1.3 degrees more planetary. It's almost a double in the city, so 2.6. So by 2050, 3.5, 4 degrees more in the city. So you see it building up. And then we calculated what the project would do. And of course, this thin layer of water at the hottest days lowers temperature, but also 180 extra trees that we plant will create evapotranspiration, meaning evaporation of the water in the leaves that lowers temperature by 5 to 7 degrees. And we planted them in a way that the cool breeze coming from the Seine can actually reach the Pavie. So a whole technical study on how to use the position of the plants, the wind, the humidity, the albedo, to create a climate resistant or climate resiliency along the cathedral. But at the same time, working on this idea of not just having people stand in line to go inside the cathedral on the western side, but have them discover the whole monument and the monuments, because the memorial of Mancuso, but there's some other beautiful buildings there. So we hope we invite people through this sequence of park figures to explore the Ile de la Cité even more.
Amazing, yeah, and I love how, when we were talking about Ile de la Cité, which of course is this island of power, of law and police and religion, and, turning it into this Ile de la Fraîcheur, where suddenly it'll be a place for respite and for communities to come together. It's, especially in the heart of Paris, it's rare.
Yeah, and something else we discovered, and I don't know if many people know that, but Ile de la Cité, it's the island of, to find a word in English.
Maybe in Flemish.
Het laatste oordeel. Het laatste oordeel dan. The last, yes, it's the island of judgment. Why? Because you have the police, you have the palace of justice, deciding whether you will be incarcerated or not. You have the hospital, deciding whether you will live or not. You have the cathedral, deciding whether you will go to heaven or not. So it's all judgment, 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 and that's really amazing. When I in my research I found it, I was like, wow, that's also maybe why there's not so many people living there. It's so
high pressure.
It's so tough. It's life or death, right?
Thank you for giving such a fascinating, in-depth, glimpse into this monumental project, which is really going to transform Paris in many ways. You have so many current projects that I thought we'd touch on one more before we give it over to questions, which is, of course, you are presenting at the Belgian Pavilion in the Venice Architecture Biennale this year, which is on until November. And you collaborated with the neurobiologist Stefano Mancuso. And for those of you who don't know, he is really a pioneer in plant intelligence. So this, idea researching that plants, like animals, communicate with each other, which is truly fascinating. And I know you guys have had, this rapport and collaboration over the last 10 years. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've discovered in your research together?
So it starts in 2017 when I'm appointed the General Commissioner of the Biennial of Architecture in Bordeaux, and I get a kind of free card to make some documentaries, basically. And so I wanted to meet Stefano Mancuso. I met him in his laboratory in Florence. And he's explaining me all this latest research into plant intelligence, how to communicate through the air, but to the roots, how if one plant is sick, the other one is giving him sugars, how even in between species, a pine tree would be giving sugars, because money is sugar, right? Sugar is what they deal with. This is what they make through photosynthesis. So the pine tree would be giving sugars to the bouleau, to the birch in winter, because the birch is not doing any photosynthesis, but it needs a bit of food. And then in summer, when the birch tree, of course, is full leaves, produces much more photosynthesis than the pine tree that has its stupid needles, in a sense, it gives it back. So that there's even this collaboration in between species. And this all is new. And I was thinking, as a landscape architect, and as somebody interested in science and arts, I was like, what does that mean for my landscapes? I cannot just put trees as if they don't communicate. So if they communicate, how do they communicate? How do I make it communicate better? How can I create a kind of community of plants that are happy to be there? Because in the end, you're playing a bit God by saying you're going to live here, you're going to live there. I mean, it is a drastic decision. The trees I planted in Arles, they're there until they die, right? So you're kind of aware of that decision that you're making. You try to make the best one. Every time a tree dies, it's a failure, right? So we start this discussion, and we started looking at different projects, and then came this open call from the Flanders Architecture Institute that organizes the competition for the Belgian pavilion. And I was thinking, a building it's another microclimate. It's not so different from the outside. It's just that we make an artificial climate for ourselves. And so I thought, can I use this kind of methodology that we've built up and apply it for the building? And I had an extra drive in that never has a landscape architect been the curator of a pavilion. So I thought, let's
give them something to write home about.
Let's try, you know. And so I don't know if you know the Belgian pavilion. We spoke about pavilions before. Here today, it's the oldest pavilion of the Giardini, the first one, made by Leopold II. Very Palladian architecture, central hall with a skylight. And so we thought, if we take off the vellum of the skylight, and if we bring an ecology adapted to the specific climate of the pavilion, how can these plants produce a microclimate? So the same as Arles, but inside. And I thought, okay, what climate is a building? Well, we heat buildings to 20 degrees. What's 20 degrees? It's subtropical. It's very easy. We keep the temperature constant all year round. Like what? Like the subtropics. Of course, you have the roof. So basically, we took 400 plants from the understory of a subtropical forest, living in the shade of the bigger trees. We installed them. We first tested them for 6 months in Ghent to make sure it would work, because it was a daring proposal. And then we worked with the University of Ghent, who have developed the latest technology in understanding what a tree needs. So there's 3 witness trees here that measure girth, meaning trees expanding and contracting. Because in the day, a tree contracts when the water is going up, and at night, when photosynthesis stops, that water comes back down, and that's when the tree grows. So a tree is breathing, in a sense, in and out, while at the same time we measure the sap flow going up. So we know exactly how much evapotranspiration is happening in the leaves by calculating how much water goes from the roots to the leaves. So very technical, but the University of Ghent helped us with that. And then we installed our little forest. We did it ourselves, which was really also fun to do with my team. And we decided to give these trees agency of 3 actions. So if photosynthesis stops because there's no more water, they call for rain. And I have 2 rain lines. So you can see one right there. And suddenly it started raining. If it gets cloudy and photosynthesis stops because of lack of sunlight, these special growing lights turn on. And if the humidity becomes too high because of the evapotranspiration, photosynthesis would stop. So we extract the humidity from the pavilion. And so we call it building biospheres, in the idea that the building becomes a biosphere, the act of building biospheres. And we've been conducting tests, because I see it as a prototype, for the last 6 months now. These are some pictures at the opening. So here you see the sap flow meter, and here you see the dendrometer. Those are the 2 meters that we have. And all the data is in real time projected in a room adjacent to the central hall, and on my phone, so I could daily check what was happening. And it's been quite amazing. I'll show you some of the graphs. So of course, as I told you, evapotranspiration lowers temperature. On the hot summer days in Venice, people come into Belgium and feel like, we put chairs, and they wouldn't even watch. They would just like be there, like, and then hang around and do their meals or whatever. But
no microclimate, yeah. That's
what I wanted. I didn't want to see it. I wanted to feel it, And so that, and I got many everybody that went to Venice sent me a picture like, wow, it's so fresh, it's so refreshing, and so. But I wanted to get to this. So here you see in real time we project the sap flow of these 3 witness trees, and then we have 3 weather stations, one on top of the pavilion, like a little antenna to announce the exhibition, one in a reference room that we cut off from the plants, and one in the plants. And it was interesting to see that in winter, or in the beginning when it was cold, it would be outside 16 degrees, the plants would heat it up to 120. When outside gets to 25 degrees, the plants cool it down to 20. So we saw that there was always this kind of regulation of the plants, and here you see the kind of peaks. 16th of May, 4 degrees lower inside compared to the reference room, -5, -3. So it becomes a cooling machine, but also one that produces humidity. So now we're thinking in the applications of it. We have 2-3 projects where we try to develop this to use this capacity to lower the temperature and to create fresh air, because the air from these plants is much better than the air circulating through air conditioning.
It almost looks like the stock market, like this.
Yeah, but the more it
on
goes
your
down,
phone,
the
you're
better it is,
every day up and down. Yeah.
But I was looking all the time, like, what's the high score? What's the high score? So what we try to do here is to say that architecture has always been about survival on the planet. Like, why did we take out logs from the wood? Why did we make roofs? We were protecting ourselves against rain, against wind, against snow, against sun. And so, going back to my warming stripes, in a climate that's changing, architecture should again be about survival, not just about form, but not only survival of us, because we won't survive with the whole ecosystem. So can you imagine that maybe we start making roofs that allow plants to grow even when it's 4 degrees warmer? And when you say that, many people get very nervous about it, but it's the reality we are facing. I mean, we are going to a warmer planet. We are going to longer periods of drought. We are going to more intense rain. I'm going to Athens on Friday. I have a presentation of a project we've done for the mayor of Athens, seeing how we can intervene now. Because again, to bring it to the IPCC, we have 10 years, a window of opportunity to get these cities ready. And that's now. And I want to end with this one, if you give me 5 more minutes.
Yes, you're allowed.
Because it brings us to the force of imagination, I would say. And we haven't spoken about that yet, but I've worked a lot with scientists like Stefano Mancuso, but also a lot with artists. And those two, for me, are really my inspiration. It's the collaborations with artists and scientists. And this collaboration is one of the first ones, maybe in 2010. Philippe Parreno, known French artist, who had just read an article in 2010 saying that NASA said that, well, they had been looking for life on a planet like ours lit by a sun, and suddenly somebody said, but it could also be a dwarf planet lit by 2 suns. And they were like, oh, we have to check all these planets because we didn't calculate that. And it's called, NASA calls it CHZ, continuously habitable zones where life is possible continuously. And so he asked me, like, do you want to make that planet lit by 2 suns? And I was like, yeah, great. What does a planet lit by 2 suns look like? So in NASA literature, I found out that they said that probably the plants would become black to better deal with the double frequency of the 2 suns. Okay? So I looked up all the black plants of this planet. Deep purple, really black is hard to find. And then we found this terrain in Portugal. We did a surface burn. In Portugal, we needed a parliamentary derogation, as you can imagine, with the fire brigade from Porto. But so we wanted to create this black garden, and it was really amazing because I made this garden as good as I could, and the idea was from the beginning that the landscape would only exist in the film. And this, I'm bringing a bit of philosophy back in, but Alain Roger would say the land is the starting point, the landscape is the way you look at it. So a land becomes a landscape through an artistic intervention, like a painting. And Philippe said, like, let's make a landscape that only exists in the film, but not in reality. So I made this 5 interventions, and then he came with his crew, and they kind of destroyed half of it. And I was like, what? And I understood, and this is a beautiful shot of Darius Conji, famous cinematographer, like a moonlander, filming these black plants and these roots that we had unearthed, and I understood that in a sense, I make images to produce a new reality, because in the office what we do is we make images, right? That's kind of the basic stuff we do. While Philippe or Darius, they would use reality to make images. And for me, there was a profound understanding that in landscape, it's always circular, because the reality invites for a new vision or images that produce a new reality, that produces new images. And so you understand that in everything we do, we just try to make things better, but never final. Try to start processes. And so these landscapes then became these film shots, were amazing. You see these 2 suns. So the film that Philippe made, CHZ, a dry river with diamond dust, and then also suddenly in film you can cheat, right? It's only the image that counts, and I was like, wow, because they were lighting like this. Oh, my landscape were like, we're so dumb still. So it was really, these are the roots that you see, or you see the light filtered here. So that was an amazing experience to also remind ourselves, like we have to think the unthinkable, like the unseen, to quote Duchamp, is the visible that's not perceived yet. And so that idea of revealing a possible landscape is really, I think, the essence of what I try to do.
Well, that's perfectly and beautifully rounded out. And the word survival really stuck with me as a beautiful way to end this question of form and impact. And so I would like to thank Bas Smets for the fantastic presentation and for sharing your work, and to Christina, of course, for having us. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.